Welcome to the podcast. And our podcast episode is going to be dedicated to the fascinating world of Unix and Linux. In this one, we're going to delve into the history of features, impact of powerful operating systems. And please do join us as we explore the origins of Unix, tracing its roots back to the 1960s and its influence on the development of Linux in the 1990s. We'll discuss the key principles behind Linux and Unix, including the open source nature and the philosophy of collaboration. From the command line interface to the vast array of applications and distributions available today, we'll explore the versatility and stability of Linux and Unix. And whether you are a tech enthusiast or simply curious about these influential operating systems, this episode is sure to broaden your understanding of the Linux and Unix landscape. So, welcome to the That IT Show, where talk meets tech, and vice versa. Please roll the intro. Okay, so do I do the other part of the text, or are we going to improvise?
No, this is freestyle, man.
Okay, so we are going to improvise.
Of course, as always.
So let's talk about Minix. The reason why I did this is because the first letter in the rest of the document is Unix. So let's talk about Minix.
Yeah, let's talk about Apollo guidance computer.
No, but I have a reason why I said that, because I think that what defined Unix and Linux today was Minix.
Okay.
I think that the breaking point between something that was not different from VMS, no different from any other boring operating systems.
Operating system.
And in the 70s was Minix. So they had Unix, they had Unices. So whatever versions of Unix with a CS, Unix with an X, Unix with whatever, and different versions of IBM's operating systems back then that were also pretty. They had a pretty big share on the operating system. This is market in the 70s, in the 60s, and nothing was different between those. They were just corporate things. Then Unix came along, tried to develop something that could be called compatibility and standards. And then suddenly people decided that they're going to create Minix as a way of teaching how Unix works. And then people understood that since they had the standards, they had the idea that they are actually able to create their own system. So a guy from Finland decided that he is going to try to recreate another version of the Unix, but this time something that is going to be open source.
Okay. By the way, Minix is prominently mentioned in the document.
Yes, no. Yes, but it should be. It should be.
Cool. Okay.
So let's talk about Thomson, Ritchie, Kernighan, and the other guys
from AT&T Bell Labs.
AT&T, yes.
Yeah, I actually, as I wasn't actually preparing for this episode. I just stumbled across a series of old AT&T videos about Unix.
Yeah, yes, you shared that, and I think that we can share the rest of them in the comments.
Description. Yes,
description,
that's
yes.
absolutely something that we could, should, and will do. I spent a lot of hours watching these videos, and I also went to Lex Friedman's podcast with Brian Kernighan as well. He had a couple of appearances there, and a couple of others as well. And suddenly I realized that there is much more to this story than I previously envisioned or thought that there was, especially from the perspective of what you and I ended up doing in our lives as well. Because the impact of Unix on broader IT ecosystem cannot be overstated. But also I wanted to approach the episode from the perspective of how it influenced our lives and our journey towards Linux, and how Linux influenced our jobs, careers, our free and fun time, which we don't have enough of today anymore.
I have a reason why I mentioned Linux in the start, because while I was driving here, I kept thinking
Water.
about how different parts of computing changed with open source, and I couldn't escape the thinking about how Unix was something that was more or less commercial and strictly enterprise targeted in the start.
Correct.
Because nobody thought that they could exist personal computer that would be able to run the Unix, because Unix used to be run on mainframes that took a whole building to run. And
hold on there for a
yes,
second.
but then they tried with PDP. PDP was much smaller.
Yeah, because basically the background of popularity of Unix started with microcomputers as well.
Yes, but they got there. But I think that when Linux came along, it was an echo of what an operating system that is Unix-like could look like if you try to use it in education.
Okay.
And the only difference between what is happening there and what is happening, for example, in the processor world, because we have processors, almost all the universities try to develop their own educational version of the processor, but we don't have a Linux equivalent of a processor. We don't have a processor that is widely accepted as something that is a standard, that is widely accepted as something that is actually running commercial-grade applications.
A sidebar.
Other than ARM.
Sidebar. No, that's perfectly reasonable. Sidebar to this, or a tangent to this.
Okay.
I would say that you are at least partially wrong, because that's exactly what Unix was.
Yes, I know. But
this is not the whole story. Actually, in the ecosystem of that era, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that we are talking about as like a backdrop to what happened at the beginning of 1990s, so Linux and whatnot, something else was happening. It was actually, the IBM PC era started, and then the clones started as well. There were a lot of lawsuits. They were, they're trying to copy within the realms of non-patent infringement, blah, 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 all of that. So there were actually more than a few parallel processes happening as the end game, let's say, of Unix and Linux and OS2 and Windows was happening on the, let's say, in the operating system realm.
Yes, but you also had the different thread that was running MS-DOSes, CPMs, Z80s, MSX computers from Japan, different versions of different operating systems intended for different things. So the market was completely bonkers then.
Yeah.
You could...
The spread on the market was crazy.
Yes, you could, not only theoretically, but practically, people did create their own computer, created their own operating system that was BASIC-based, that was assembler-based. You could put on the market something that would be not marketable today, but it would be completely shunned because nobody would be able to use it, because people were more or less happy with having an image on the screen, any image. Be it a text mode in something that is PAL. So this was a different time back then. But I think that what Unix did and what Linux did and what Linux did is it enabled people to understand that something that is run in the enterprise can be run on the desktop, can be run cheaply or for no money at all. And that
commercial licenses of Unix for the enterprise were hell of expensive.
Yes, but the Linux said, okay, but you can run something like this on the desktop, and at the same time you can actually gain knowledge and gain education that enables you to run the Unixes so that you can actually make money.
There's actually a second part of that story. I don't necessarily think that we should go very deeply into the history. I think we can do that in over a span of multiple episodes because it's a very interesting topic. But one thing should be mentioned as one of the key things or key early things or some, let's say, primary reasons why Unix is so important. For me, the reason why Unix is so important is the fact that it introduced something that was mostly not really there on the market at that time. And I'm not talking necessarily about the operating system, although that's definitely a story. I'm talking about compatibility.
I think that the main thing that they actually were able to do is they didn't have a corporation that was hanging around them. So nobody was watching over their shoulder. And
You mean like IBM OS 2?
like IBM 360.
Okay.
Because IBM 360, if you remember the Mythical Man Month book and the whole shebang about how IBM 360 became an operating system, because it was one of the leading operating systems back then. This design by committee was stopping people from thinking about how things could be done. If you
Should be done.
No, could be done. Because when people try to understand how things could be done, they decide of one of the solutions to a problem how they should be done then. If you have a committee, you have much tougher time to give people the idea that they can decide on something. And having an operating system that is designed basically, not designed, but thought through by a couple of people, 2 or 3 persons, so it's such a small team that you don't have a problem, and your problem with decisions just simply goes away. Decisions in a committee like IBM take months.
Yeah, big corporations take a long time to. They
So
drag their feet before they reach a conclusion.
Yes,
or a
because
decision.
I think that most of the Unix was done in such a way that people who designed it, so Ritchie, Kernighan, and Thompson, more or less just got a piece of paper, put down a list of requirements, a list of things that they can do, just brainstormed, and then continue working on it.
There's actually another story to this, I think, which is very important. I mean, I think I heard a story, from the mouth of somebody who should know about it, that Dennis Ritchie, when he was writing C, and the story of Unix is intrinsically linked to the story of C.
Yes.
Absolutely, like directly.
Like Z80 and BASIC and all the 8-bit computing in the 80s with BASIC.
Yeah. Okay, so he basically wanted, he had some free spare time. He had some vacation time, like 2 or 3 weeks or whatnot. And he sent his wife and children on vacation while staying home. And in 3 weeks, he wrote, he basically...
did the kernel.
He did C.
But this is not something that that surprises me.
It does, not from the perspective of then, because back then people were capable of doing these things because they were much lower in the stack of understanding of how all of this works.
Yes.
Engineering was way different then. I actually found a video today of a guy making his own x86 clone. So basic XT computers, something like XT compatible, back in the day when IBM was still doing all of the lawsuits with all of the others on the market.
Yes, because you could buy a handful of components and then get your own computer running.
Yeah, but it still boggles the mind because today there's no way.
There is no way, and not only you could create your own computer that was able to run something, you could also create your own assembly. Because enough knowledge existed for you to be able to do this, but the pool of knowledge was much smaller than today, so a lot less was expected from the operating system itself. Because the operating system just basically had to, in the smallest possible implementation, was more or less the thing that should be capable of getting a file, dump it into the memory, point the program counter to it, and say, okay, this is going to be run.
Actually, that's a part of the larger story as well, of one of the big things that Unix changed forever. The file structure, the hierarchy, the directories, and everything is a file.
Everything is a file, everything should be simple and not simpler than that, and so on.
And all of the commands and all of the things that they developed basically were structured around the standard of the file system, which could be used for anything, which is vastly different to what it was at that time. And it was a very good idea.
So my complete disruption of your trying to go with the history is going to end up with me going back to the history. So,
of course.
Let's talk about 60s. Let's talk about Bell Labs. Let's talk about the research team that was there. And let's talk about what they tried to achieve.
They had a project to do Unix. What was the name of the Unix? I think with the CS.
CS, yes.
and then they tried to do something else.
So
and they were
Uniplex, the information and computing system.
They tried to do that, and then they realized that they cannot finish all of the things that they wanted in time. Hence, the free vacation of Dennis Ritchie and the Unix was born and everything else. And then they switched completely to that, which was, I cannot even begin to describe how much freedom they had to have to do stuff like that.
But I think that the freedom came from the idea of that the system they're designing first didn't mean nothing at all to other people at the time.
Okay.
Because they're one of the research teams in the AT&T. AT&T was huge. So a small research team that contained only 3 people is something that was probably completely free to do whatever they wanted, as long as they provided some results from time to time. So in a big corporation like this, being able to do your own stuff, provide your reports more or less, and
I shudder to think that anybody asked them for reports, but okay.
Yes, but probably they had to provide some sort of structured idea of what they were doing, and they said just we are researching operating systems, and combine this with the idea of we are going to be running an operating system that's going to be different from all the other incompatible operating systems by being compatible to itself, was something that wouldn't draw any attention. From our perspective, it's a breakthrough. From their perspective, they had first the idea of what they were doing, they had the freedom, and they had the money.
Mm-hmm.
So they were able to provide themselves with the terminals, they were able to provide themselves with the computing power to be able to run the first systems, because the PDP-7, which they were running, they were doing the operating system for, wasn't cheap.
Mm-hmm.
It was a piece of hardware that was expensive even by today's standards.
It was. Their licenses were, if you're talking about corporate, let's say Unix licenses, they were like something in the realms of $2,000 back then.
Yes.
Per computer.
Yes. So and they had to produce terminals. They had to produce. First, they had to produce the hardware, so they had to have available hardware to talk to each other, to be able to provide the terminals with, dumb terminals, but you needed to have dumb terminals back in the 60s.
Yeah. So everything was revolving around them.
Yes, because the alternative was teleprinters.
Actually,
and this is where ASCII came from. So
I wanted to expand on that. Just a couple of let's say points to be made there, because you mentioned ASCII and there are other things. You would be amazed at the amount of people who received Nobel Prizes and Turing Awards and similar stuff, which is super big claim in the scientific community, who used to work there.
But both Bell Labs and Xerox were basically the places where the computing was born.
Yep.
And not only for
as we know it today.
Yes, not only for the paradigms that they established, so the user interfaces, the objects, the operating systems ideas like
file
in Unix,
systems, the BIOS,
streams,
the this,
streams. Yes. So they were the places where ideas were born and where ideas were implemented. Because I think from
on merit.
Yes, but what I see from today's perspective, a lot of things that we take for granted were just stuff that was thrown at the wall and stuck. They were creating stuff, and some of those things worked. Some didn't. Mm-hmm. But we are seeing this. We have a survivor's bias, basically. We are seeing things that worked, but we don't know what happened back then.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of material if you want to find out. But yeah, generally.
But I always want to know what was rejected. When I think about those things, I want to know what
drama
was
queen.
No, but I want to know what was rejected. What were different ideas that were supposed to be Unix but were left behind?
I suppose that a lot of them were probably very brilliant.
Yes, you must take into account that those were the funny days of a lot of acid being dropped and people.
Please don't go there.
People doing creative thinking in other ways.
Other realms visited
yes.
and whatnot. Yeah, I know. Actually, the other point that needs to be made there. Unix gained popularity primarily from the business perspective. Banks, financial institutions, blah, 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 the terminals, the mainframes, all of that is true. Then came the micro side of that with smaller microcomputers and whatnot. This is basically the introduction to the home computer era, right before that. But at the same time, they had a lot of stuff that was standardized, that they had applications. They were already talking about many concepts that we know of today: multitasking, multi-user system, scheduling. All of those terms come from that era. It's not like they were invented afterwards. And after that era came the era of computing, which is much more aligned to what we know today. Still different, but very similar to what we have today.
I think that the main thing that I'm seeing as the driving force behind Unix was a complete shift from trying to create an application that is going to be a solution to your problems. So basically, older systems kept booting into a particular application. So you had the bootstrap, you had your operating system, but operating system was just there to boot you into whatever applications you bought, and then you had to use this application. The idea of having a kernel and then separating user applications, system applications, and everything else, so the S bin, user bin, and so on, the directories, was something that was strange then. It's
unbelievably normal now.
Yes, but imagine having to boot into an operating system that is the application. So imagine booting into the Word.
Yeah, I know. I understand.
But imagine booting into Chromium, in Chrome OS.
Please don't go there.
Yes, but this is the return of what we had in the 60s. And I'm completely fine with this. I'm completely fine with having cheap computers that are appliances.
Actually, we have a video about installing Chromium OS on the channel as well.
Yeah, yes, I know, but these are appliances, what we call appliances today. But general purpose computing today means completely separate things.
Can I throw you a bone? Because you were so kind to throw me a bone with Linux, I have one for you.
Okay.
You've been saying a lot of these big fancy words.
Okay.
And not necessarily, it's not like a given that all of our listeners and content consumers are all that deep into computing. So what's an operating system?
It's the synergy of software and hardware.
Don't tell me that. Explain.
So basically,
I have a reason why I'm asking, but go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to try to do the simplest possible explanation. If you have a piece of hardware, you want to be able to do something on it. Since you don't want to deal with all the different hardware things, so you don't want to deal how your mouse works, you don't want to think about how your graphic cards work, how your memory works, how your CPU works, however everything else works, you need some piece of software, the operating system, that is going to enable you to issue your own commands that are going to be simple to somebody that is going to deal with the hardware. And this is the operating system.
Okay, what is its exact role?
To take control of all the hardware and enable you to do some useful operations on it.
Be more technical.
I refuse to.
There is an angle why I'm asking you this.
Yes, because I don't know what your angle is, so I'm not going to go out on a limb there.
Yeah, you're scared. You are a cat.
No. But I know that since I threw you off the start with
yeah, that was awesome.
Yes.
I have some extra for you later.
Yeah, yes, I know. But the idea of an operating system is more or less the idea of having somebody doing the somebody or something doing heavy lifting for you so that you don't need to think about the hardware. And then you can go into details. You can go into details to decide, okay, is the operating system only the kernel? Are the modules operating system? Because they are not produced by the operating system manufacturer. So if I get a third party or any party video card and they produce their own drivers, are the drivers operating system for the video card, and am I having two different operating systems running at the same time?
Okay.
Because we can run an operating system inside the video card now.
Yeah, I know. We've been able to do that for quite many years, actually. There were earlier examples.
So, but I'm not interested in this. I'm just interested in we have a thingy inside the computer that is able to run the things inside.
I'm not happy with that explanation.
Okay,
I have a reason why.
You wanted a simple explanation.
No, I want the technical one, and I said that out loud.
Okay.
Actually, the reason why I'm asking is that I actually came across, it was today, a couple of hours before I
Okay.
came here, I came across a video that's very, very old from
Okay.
a TV show that's also very, very old, which was called The Computer Chronicles. I don't know if you watched that.
Yes.
There's a channel on YouTube with a lot of the episodes, and in one of the episodes they're talking about the operating systems, and they say with a little bit, I mean they have a little bit more time leeway time-wise, but functionality of operating system: establish interface, permit multiple users. This is the one that we're going to come back on in a second. Manage data files, we already mentioned that. Handle I/O, error recovery, system accounting, and maintenance accounting. From the perspective of a person who did this in the 1980s, so this is a show from 1984.
Yes.
It is almost exactly 40 years old.
Yes.
Okay, this is eerily correct.
Yes, but this was back way then when people who were called journalists
Knew what the hell they're talking about.
not only knew what they were talking about, they also consulted people called experts, and then those experts provided fact checking and concept checking for everything that was broadcasted. So this is not a result of a single person trying to write down a show in the last 10 minutes before the recording. This was something actually thinking this through for a couple of weeks. So I'm not surprised, but let me just have a little disagreement with you. Everything here is not everything, but multi-user systems, system accounting, and maintenance accounting is directly connected to having a multi-user system. Operating systems that had single users, and this is what was then prevailing on the personal computer market.
And for many, many years after.
Didn't need system accounting, didn't need maintenance accounting, because accounting itself was something that only wasted resources and nobody was interested in this.
Correct.
This was in time-sharing systems.
Yes.
So remember the time-sharing systems.
Oh, yes.
And,
Oh, yes.
So
Good old UNIX systems prior to this one.
yes,
as well.
so I think that trying to define a operating system like something that had to have multiple users on it is okay.
Exactly the point where I want to go next.
Okay, so go with your point.
So basically, in 1984, somebody made a show which was hugely popular back then. This was one of the biggest shows back then. Said that permitting operating system functionality needs to allow multiple users to work in it. In 1984, only Unix could do that,
Yes.
which set the standard.
Okay, but you had time-sharing systems that were able to do this.
Yeah, were you
HP
able to buy
had-
them?
Yes, if you had an
Were
enormous-
you, person, piece one, able to buy that? How many years did you have to work for that?
I was 6. I don't know. I
That's
actually,
awesome.
I actually don't know. Probably from a perspective of a 6-year-old, I would be able to do it in today's United States, probably, because they're
Don't. Not the point of the show.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is that there were other operating systems and there were solutions that enable you to do the.
Yeah, but there were still Unixes.
Yes, they had to be.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say. But my point is actually, let's completely role reverse this. Imagine having the foresight to say that an operating system needs to be multi-user operating system 40 freaking years ago. That's my point.
Okay, but you had Kix and you had VMS.
Again, Unixes.
Yes, but completely separate development, completely separate ideas from
Not the
Unix.
point. Having the foresight to say that as a requirement for the operating system 40 years ago, from
Okay.
the perspective on them, that's
Okay, we can.
like.
I'm
ahead
just
of
going
time.
to say that for me, this is something inconsequential because if you think about the
Every single system that you work on nowadays is a multi-user system.
yes, but think about the systems back then. You had a single computer because they were hugely expensive. You had a lot of people trying to use them. So enabling multi-user usage of the single system was something that was a given. They had to do it. back way then, they were experimenting with having a computer that's going to run your programs in a way that you brought your programs in a bag on punch cards, and then you gave the punch cards to a person. The person was running your program, and then you got your output back on the printout.
Yep.
So this was one way of doing it multi-user. But this was not running a
This
computer
was
system.
really not a multi-user, but yes, I understand.
Yes, so you had to do it.
It's not only that. The point of the early of those timeshare systems is what ended up being multi-user systems with scheduling.
I think that the scheduling part is interesting.
Yes.
Because time sharing and scheduling is not the same.
Absolutely not.
And what they did with the scheduling, the idea of a process, the idea of a stream, the idea of a file system by itself, the idea of a flexible file system that enables you to mount multiple disks and different...
Use same commands on all of the data, basically.
Use all the same commands, all the data, have the data structured in such a way that one command can use the data from another the command.
Pipeline.
Yes, but I think that one of the most important things that are usually completely neglected is the idea of an operating system that uses a file structure that hasn't changed for the last 60 years or so.
Because it was well designed.
It was well designed, and the file system itself and the file structure and the standards for this file structure were defined in such a way that you now you don't care about which file system you're using. On the same system.
Yeah, it's exactly the same on all operating systems, including Microsoft.
Yes, but in Microsoft, you cannot have two different disks running completely separate file systems easily on the same machine.
You mean Windows installations? Or
No, I cannot create two directories that are going to be on separate disks and then those disks to be on the completely different file systems. I cannot create, I can create two disks. I can mount two disks that are completely different. So one is going to be, I don't know, NFS mounted through the network. I can mount another one through Samba. I can mount a third one through NTFS. Okay. But I cannot create two directories that the user is not going to be aware of and then create completely different file systems. One, for example, to have, I don't know, B3-based journaling, so it is going to be able to run extremely fast on small files, and then have another one that is going to be able to do redundancy or whatever. So this is something that changed the idea of an operating system for me.
Okay, I get it.
Because this is what is the main difference between the Windows and the Linux right now, is the ability to have a completely flexible operating system, file system, and this file system is different than the file structure.
Okay, I'm with you on that one as well. Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. Yeah, one other point. Basically, the idea of Unix came from research that was done there.
Yes.
Then Unix kind of like went out of the research into universities, which is again research in a sense. And after that, it basically came to when the world was ready, when the technology was ready, blah, 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 all that. Then it came to personal computers, which is the story of later on of Linux, which we are going to go into as well. I find that path to be very interesting, especially when you compare that to what happens today.
I'm completely with you. I wanted to go back to the file system, and I'm going to say one thing that was the most interesting feature of the operating system from my perspective when I first saw it. Even today, I think that this is one of the most distinguishing features for any operating system. File magics. So file magic enables you to combine whatever you want inside your operating system without thinking about what are you trying to do, without having to define file extensions, without having to define strict command shells that are going to run your commands, because everything can be a file, everything can be an executable, everything can be used to execute anything if you want to. So you can create your own interpreter for whatever. You can create your own scripts or binaries for whatever. You can incorporate them into the operating system, and they're going to work. In Windows, this is completely impossible.
Come on, that's what PowerShell is all about.
Yes.
Just trolling a little bit.
Yes, but okay, I'm completely fine. with Windows having a command line that is 50 years old and still incompatible with itself, and then having a PowerShell that is
Still incompatible with itself.
In each subsequent.
Not each one, but among some of them.
Yes, but they are the ones that are pushing for the. They are the ones pushing for the compatibility, backwards compatibility. Linux changed entire structure of the executable file when they switched from AOut to ELF, and it was done flawlessly.
Thank you for mentioning Microsoft, because and thank you for mentioning Linux.
Yes.
Because the next topic is
Linux.
No. Linux.
Okay. No. Okay.
Yeah. So Linux was something that Microsoft did. They actually bought the commercial license to do Unix, developed it. They sold a whole bunch. Their version of basically Linux is Unix. Their version of Linux was quite a bit substantially cheaper than what AT&T was asking for in the enterprise for the standard Unix. And they were, for a period of time, I read some information about the fact that they were the biggest seller of Unix in the world for a period of time.
But, okay, to be completely fair, right now they're the biggest.
What's wrong with you? Why do you want to be completely fair?
To be completely fair with Microsoft, right now they're the biggest cloud provider for the Unix systems.
Yes, they are.
So I think this is one of those.
No,
things.
they're second, but
okay. But in Azure,
they're only
Linux is prevalent. So
it is.
This is, you have to give where the credit is due. So Microsoft from the start, when they started using Azure, they hated Linux, but they provided the ability to run Linux because they had to. People wanted to have an operating system that is both cheap and easy to run. And at the time, Windows Server was easy to run but wasn't cheap.
Okay, it still isn't cheap.
Yes, but okay, you can buy licenses that make it cheap, but
not really in accordance to the law. But yeah.
no, you can if you do calls and if you have a huge number of users, you can make it you can make it manageable. It's not prohibitively expensive as it was back then.
Okay, I'm with you on that one as well.
Because you can buy licenses. So basically, you can buy licenses per month. You can buy them in bulk. You can buy them when you're spinning up the virtual machine. So this is not as expensive as it was.
Okay, on the other side of the story, there was BSD, a topic for some other day. Not going to delve into that.
Yes, BSD is always a topic for another day.
It is, and we're going to go into it, like I don't know, knee deep at least, or waist deep, because I find that story fascinating as well. But I wanted to just push on with the story of Unix onwards. As years went by, as the famous words say, what happened is that the same thing that made Unix very, very popular and kind of attractive for companies at the beginning, the same thing that they tried to do there kind of came back to bite them in the ass, which was related to fragmentation of the market and compatibility issues and whatnot. This is where our story starts with Unix, more or less. You started a couple of years before me. I started using Linux in 1995.
I was a little bit in front of you. You started using it in 1994, I think.
Free. I think you mentioned free, yes. But never mind.
I'm not completely sure.
Okay. I installed first one at the end of 1995. Deleted it almost immediately, but in 1996 I came back and then stuck with it. But I wanted to make something else very clear. Actually, our introduction to Unix was not Linux, because back there in the college where both of us studied, we had, it was too early to have Linux in production. We had Sun OS and then we had Solaris.
Yes, we had.
This was our growing up on Linux operating system, on Unix, sorry.
Yes, but I had the distinct opportunity to more or less run Linux as soon as I got to running Solaris, to using Solaris and using Sun OS. So, and back then, Linux and Sun OS weren't that separate, because when you
they still aren't to this very day. They're very similar. There are some differences in administration. But
yes, but when you were approaching for the user side, because back way then we were users, we dldn't know how to
remote X.
Yes, so what we had were operating systems that were pretty similar.
Mhm.
So running something on the home computer, being able to run something on the home computer that you were able to run only on the university was a big thing. And
It was, I think it was partially playing with our minds and in our hearts as well. That story, because you came to you came to college, you played around with Solaris, etc. You kind of had to because of the labs and
yes,
education and whatnot. And then you kind of wanted to have something like that at home. It was prohibitively expensive, hardware and
yes,
software. And when the right story came along, which was Linux, everybody who were, all of us from that generation, plus minus a couple of generations at college, everybody jumped on the Linux bandwagon.
yes, this is the one thing. And the other thing that enabled us to do it, and I don't know if you thought about it, is that people who were responsible for putting up a network, since Croatia was just warming up, and the people responsible for the networking for the universities, people who put up the network between the universities nodes, and then the people who put up the modem networks, were also young, and they wanted to run Linux on their own home computers. So you were able to find people who would enable you to use the modem servers to connect to internet. I think it was easier to do this than it would be to connect to the internet today, because the support itself was available directly from the providers that were providing the connection to the universities. So you had like-minded people on the other side that were still experimenting. You could do anything, and you could ask for anything. If you wanted to put up your own, mail server or internet relay chat server, you just had to ask.
I had internet relay chat server actually on my computer, and a lot
Yes.
of people used it. Yeah, but that was the at the time when we were so young, it was the expression of kind of like ultimate freedom or something.
Yes, because you could do something that was pure
It was kind of
technology.
cool.
But it was pure technology.
Yeah.
It wasn't mainstream. You could call it punk. Basically, it was
Our version of ACID.
no. You had unstructured pure technology that was not tainted by commercial. Commercial technology wasn't available, or was available, but in different spheres.
Actually, I spent the next couple of years actually after 1996 running Linux at home, but slowly getting to grips with it. No documentation, so you had to learn everything, by beating your head against the wall, because most of the projects that came afterwards, like Linux documentation project, whatnot, happened a couple of years later. I continued using Sun a lot on the side. Actually, I spent the first 3 years of college, failing of my college obligations, all of them. But I spent better part of every single freaking day sitting at our terminals and learning about it, which turned out to be good for me in the future. But of course, I wasn't aware of that at the time. That actually led me to something else, which was I started working very early, actually, already at, second year of college, maybe even the first one. I started working as a system admin for a couple of companies, and that also enabled me to see that Linux is slowly but surely going into production. So that's the first part of the story. And the second part of the story, I was involved in the IEEE student branch here in Zagreb. I worked for faculty of FSB. They had a large laboratory with Unix systems there. So I actually spent my time, or divided my time between the Sun OSs and Solarises of our college, and then there they had HPUX, Ultrix, Digital Unix, of course, and like 10 different variants of everything Unix-wise. And when I got to the full second year of college, so when I signed for electronics and all of those beautiful topics that we had to, all of those beautiful courses that we had to pass, which were very difficult and complex. This is when I was introduced to a professor who was at the electronics department, who wanted to find some people who could help him out with some of the projects that he was doing, which were computer related. He wasn't all that much into Unix, and he got some kind of a donation of 2 of my favorite machines of all time, which were Alphas 21164. So my best man and myself, we spent the best part of the next 2 years kind of like configuring all of those systems. Then we got Tektronix, oscilloscopes, and many other electronic components. We kind of like tuned all of that. It was the best time ever. But this actually brought me closer to the other side of the story of Unix, which is going to be very useful later on in life, which was the business side in a sense. This was probably the first time when I realized that this Unix Linux thingy was something that was actually capable of being a viable business model, service-based business model, obviously. Okay. This was a big revelation for me, because when you're 22, 23, you think you know everything, you know nothing. That's the usual description of people in college. I'm definitely guilty of that as well. Thankfully, thanks to the structure and the professors and all of the people working at the college where both of us went, we learned to learn. We managed to do something with that knowledge which we had, which we kind of like acquired there. But the Unix and Linux part of the story was a part of that, and yet very much separated from the college experience.
I must say that my path was quite different, because I was first running Linux on my home computer. Okay, I did college courses and everything else on the internet that was available in the university. Mm-hmm. And I got my first mail address as soon as as soon as we went to
Venus,
university.
Stilia, Sidonia, Fly.
Yes, before that you got your email address probably from Srcup.
Yeah, and Srce account we got afterwards usually.
Yes, but I got it before, because I already got it when I was finishing when I was finishing my middle school.
Yeah,
secondary school. So, but the idea of using this funny new operating system as a tool was what was interesting to me. I wasn't interested in the administration. The administration came as a side effect of trying to configure it to do whatever I wanted.
Exactly the same.
Because I needed to do some things, and I realized that DOS, Windows 95, Windows 98, and then, because we were in the realm of DOS then, weren't up to the task.
Yes.
I must say that when OS2 came along,
coincidentally a topic of one of the future podcasts.
I thought that this is going to be better than Unix or Linux.
Absolutely agreed.
Because I thought that they finally managed to throw away the problems that the Windows had, and managed to create an operating system that was actually capable of doing whatever Windows was promising. So it was able to do regular multitasking.
Yeah, first operating system which worked that way properly.
And remember that this was the first operating system that didn't stop when you had a problem with your floppy.
Yeah.
So all the operating systems back then had this problem.
Yeah, high interrupts.
Yes, and OS2 was able to do the interrupts in such a way that you were able to actually use it. You didn't care about what was happening.
But Windows still cannot do that.
Yes. This is a big problem.
Yeah.
So I had a small separation from Linux back then, but then I realized that okay, this is going to be something else. Then I put up the server by more or less taking away from we had a journalistic in the university
section
in INXET, so the students club. We had a journalistic section that was putting up local university Monkey Fair. It was called Monkey Fair. Mm-hmm. So it was a publication that was bi-monthly or whatever. And they had a computer. Mm-hmm. They had a 486 that they were using for publishing it. And then we more or less took it over and installed Debian on it. And
that was that.
Yes, we created our own server.
And I'm sure that computer went into retirement with the Debian on it.
Yes, probably the same one. But what we did is we created our own mail addresses. Mm-hmm. And this was one of those things when people don't understand this today.
Yeah,
but
I know.
If you, back then, you not only got an email address, you created your own. This was completely another thing to do.
Yeah, you felt so much power.
Yes, because you managed to create something from nothing. You got your domain, which wasn't simple. You had to buy it because we bought the domain. So we got the domain from the university, but this domain was whatever they gave us. And then we created our own domain. We created our own DNS. We created our own mailing system. And this server, in one of the reincarnations, exists even today.
Mm-hmm.
So the server that we named Marvin is always
I remember that one very well.
yeah, yes, but this one exists up until today. It got moved a lot through a lot of hardware, but it's the same server. It's the server.
Same
that we created,
idea,
yes.
yeah. For me, same story happened with IEEE.
Yes,
We had our own server there. I was administrating it all the way till the end of college. But the first time when I configured secure shell on it and when I configured sendmail on it and stuff like that, it was like, wow.
yes, and the other thing that I must say that was important to me was that sometime during the university and study, I got involved in doing basically small scale administration. I had a couple of clients. I administered a couple of networks for small clients. There was
Same.
a couple of computers. I don't know, a single computer that was dedicated server. So basically, the worst computer that they didn't want to throw out, and then they reconfigured as a server that had a single share on it, and you had to put a proxy to connect to the internet on it. You had
Good
to
old
put,
squid.
yes, you had to put on a no. I started with the proxy on Windows.
Okay.
Because back way then, Windows Server was something that you actually used. Small business server yes, but unfortunately, since my clients had to buy the licenses because they were obliged, and they had to buy the licenses because they were doing some stuff that was
Did you use Wingate
yes
for proxy?
yes,
Yeah, I remember
unfortunately.
that.
Yes,
Just Googled it.
yes, but we had to use the Windows Server, so I was more or less dragged into the Windows administration first. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to.
For me, it happened on my laptop. The same story happened on my laptop because I got my first laptop very early, actually. It was probably already something like second year college, so it was prior 2000. And I needed an operating system to run on it. And I tried all of the above. And even back then, I was still trying to make Linux work as a desktop, which never worked for me. It is what it is. I'm a Linux server man, not a Linux desktop man. And I ended up back then using Windows Server 2000. That was that's 1999 to 2000. That's the year that I'm talking about. I switched from regular Windows to Windows Server 2000 on my laptop, which was the first operating system from Microsoft that worked without a hitch for me.
I'm not with you on that. My first operating system that I ran on my desktop, so it wasn't a laptop, it was a desktop, was 351 NT.
No, I had that as well. I
Yes.
tried that and 4.0 and whatnot, but this one was actually quite stable. 2000 was very
351
good.
was stable, unless you wanted to try to game.
Then it was, yeah.
Then it was crap, because it was completely incapable of being able to support any kind of video and audio.
And the reason why I didn't have a desktop OS on that laptop wasn't that the desktop OSs of that era were not something that I used. Oh, I did. It was actually because of the fact that the laptop didn't want to work properly with the desktop OSs. Back then, laptops were an exception, not the rule.
Yes, but this is one thing, and to be completely honest, desktop versions of Windows, so the consumer version of Windows, 95, 98, 98 second edition, and so on, were crap.
They were not.
I think they were. Because you got used to having a blue screen every other day a lot. And
Okay.
yes, and
Finish.
this, if you wanted to, if I told you that your computer is going to blue screen itself
Once a day?
not once a day, but let's say once every 2 days, this was normal. Today, this wouldn't be normal. you would consider this computer to be completely crappy. I'm saying that they were crap from this perspective today. Back way then, we were happy to just reset the system and say, okay, this was wrong.
Okay. Can I counterpoint
Yes.
do a counter to that? Windows 95 for me was the only Microsoft OS of of all times, which I didn't mind reinstalling once a week. Okay, which is similar to a point, said in a different way, because I really didn't, and it worked perfectly for me. I actually have Windows 95 on one of my computers at home, still to this day works perfectly. But topic for another day. Windows 95 OSR 2, Service Release 2, when they introduced the Croatian signs and Croatian keyboard and whatnot, was the version which really worked well for me on my home desktop. 98 first version was unusable. 98 SE was excellent.
Yes,
for me
second
as well.
edition. Second edition was the best operating system back way then.
And
But the competition was weak.
yeah, it was, of course. I agree. By then, unfortunately, OS2 was already dead, largely because of one big marketing blunder by IBM, which we're going to discuss in another episode, which was mind-boggling, but it is what it is. Thank you, Paramount Pictures, if I remember correctly. After that came Windows Millennium Edition, which I'm sure you know how I feel about, but if you don't remember, is by far the worst OS that Microsoft ever made.
I think that since we switched in some way we switched from Unix to Windows, Millennium Edition was something akin to a traffic accident. Everybody knew that it existed. Mm-hmm. Nobody's talking about it, and everybody has a blurry idea that something bad happened. Mm-hmm. But they don't want to revisit it.
They don't want to revisit the memories.
Yes, so something bad happened in the start of the 2000s, and people completely ignored it. Either installed Windows Server 2000, mm-hmm. or used Windows 98 second edition until XP came out.
Yeah, for me, I used Linux every single day on my in the IEEE student branch. I used it for in my clients' offices as well. I had two free clients that I was doing system maintenance for. One of them was actually a public company that's close to our ex-college. And on my private computers, I tried very hard to have the Linux as a desktop, but never succeeded. I used it as a server. I had a dual boot, usually on both my home computers and my laptops. So if I wanted to do something quickly and I needed to do something for the labs, for assignments, whatnot, I would just put Linux and everything would be fine. And first version of Linux that I ran permanently, like for a long, long time. Hence, that's where my story with Red Hat comes from. I used more than a few Linux distributions before that. But for me, Red Hat 3.03 Picasso version was the first version that I really used up to its limits from day one to when I switched to Red Hat 4 or whatever it was next. Just like you, I installed Slackware many times and Turbo Linux and all of the above, whatever. I wrote more than a few articles about it for our URX magazine as well, and never really managed to kind of like untangle myself from Red Hat, which was actually a happy accident. It was a happy accident because when I realized that I'm wasting so much time constantly trying different Linux distributions, like we're this, SUSE that, this, that, blah, 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 Red Hat, this and that, I kind of got frustrated and said, I'm going to try to rationalize this, kind of like make it a rational process. I'm going to pick and select for myself a Linux distribution that works for me, like no blue screens, as you said,
yes.
kernel dumps. I want it to be easy to install. That was my first and key requirement.
Yes, back way then it was a big thing.
Because for our viewers / listeners, back in the day that we are discussing, deploying Slackware 1.0 required many floppy disks, almost all.
70, something like 70.
Yes, they were divided in A, P, D, Q, and
you had groups of floppy disks.
Yes.
Each of those had to work.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you had bad sectors on the floppies.
70 floppy disks is something like 3 kilos of floppy disks or so. So it was a huge amount of space required to.
What
to
ended
install
up
the system.
happening, you like deployed the first 20 disks, then the 21st didn't work properly, then you went back to college, copied it back, then went back home without turning off the computer, and many
Yes,
times
this,
over.
this is the point. Yes.
Yeah, which was fun, not. But it is what it is. For me, the reason why Red Hat prevailed, actually, in my story, is Slackware already started slowly to die down from the perspective of how many users people are using it. And most people started gravitating towards either Red Hat or Debian. It was those days. I tried to deploy Debian back then many, many times, and decided that I would rather take off my arm from the elbow down than use Debian from the perspective of deployment, which was...
Okay, but Debian deployment wasn't that bad.
No, back then it was.
Okay, but it wasn't that bad compared to Slackware. Slackware didn't have a deployment strategy. You just chose what you wanted to do as you were doing it. It required enormous amount of knowledge to know what you needed to install, and then
not my experience, but okay, I understand.
Yes, but when, because you were experienced then back then, you knew. I think that the way Slackware worked is that since all the floppies never worked, you restarted the installation process so many times that you got used to it even before you installed your first complete installation.
That's absolutely true.
So it was okay, but also it was way back then when we needed to recompile the kernel for every single thing.
And that was actually my biggest playground, and by far the source of the most of the learning curve that I went
because imagine, for all the listeners today, imagine that if you want to install an application, one of the requirements is not installing a package. One of the requirements is completely recompiling the kernel of the operating system, because this is required for the application to work. And not only recompiling it, but actually sometimes having to change the C code for the application in order to accommodate for the particular kernel and particular version of the operating system that you're using right now. And this was both frustrating and immensely interesting.
You know what was my biggest source of knowledge from that side of the story that you just said? SCSI.
Yes.
Not networking, not modems, not sound cards, not video cards. That was easy. SCSI was something else.
My biggest source of complete frustration was switching from different chipsets to different chipsets. Okay. Because back way then you had to tell the kernel which chipset and which processor you're using, so the optimization for this particular processor would available on the kernel. And the amount of times I recompile the kernel just to change things is probably in hundreds.
I actually, for a while I was counting. I did more than 2,000.
Yes, but I know it was hundreds because I was... okay, one more thing. Recompiling the kernel wasn't a 10-minute job.
So on my first computer that I heavily used at home, DX400, yes, it took something like 6 hours.
I think it's something like 4 or 5.
Then I went to Klamath, so Pentium 2, and then it took 2 hours.
Yes, but first you had to think your configuration through. You had to use the menu config, so you had to use the...
I did not use the menu config ever.
I used the menu config because I was... when I was so frustrated with kernel, I decided that I'm going to use the ncurses for the cursed thing, and I'm just going to click through the configuration.
Ncurses rock, but not for that.
Yes, but okay, so I decided on ncurses, and I decided on the closest thing that you got to the user interface to be able to click through the entire different things, and then you had to first reconfigure it, then pre-compile it, then compile it, then wait, reboot.
Then modules install.
And then it wasn't working. And then go back to the start and redo from start.
Yeah, while one.
Yes, so this was one of those things that was frustrating, but this was the way that we learned how to use it. Because you had to know how the scheduling worked. You had to understand what was happening in the
You
modules.
had to know your hardware.
You had to know your hardware. You had to know which version of the hardware you were using.
I was buying hardware off of the list of compatible hardware with the kernel. That was my thing.
Yes, this is one option, and the other option was using experimental version of the hacked version of the Adaptec controller for the whatever.
Yeah.
Because nobody had a working device driver for the SCSI back way then.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was experimental, and you had to put up with stuff going completely wrong. I would say every other week.
I remember actually when I was doing probably my 2500th kernel compile, I was actually on the phone, those things that used to have a big cord between the that funny thing that we used to have. Bad joke. I was talking on the phone like this. Then I put it like this. And then I was like, okay, yes, no, M, yes, no, M, yes, no, M, module, yes, no. Basically doing it without watching at the screen, because for the kernel versions 2.x, I did it so many times I didn't need anything. I actually compiled the 2.x versions of the kernels more times by editing the .config file than by going to the menu. Completely bonkers.
I started doing that because it was quicker.
It was much faster.
It was quicker because the menu config started being bloated, and it still exists today.
I know. Xconfig as well.
I think it is something like some thousands of different options.
Yes.
And there is no way for a person to be completely sane when he finishes everything.
He or she finishes the.
Yes.
I knew every single option in the menu in the text config. When I was doing it, I could just recite it to you.
Okay.
286, BX, FX, chipset, blah, 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 blah. Every single one of them. It was just pure insanity.
Yes,
but thankfully I stopped doing that 20-odd years ago.
Thankfully, when I got first kernel that was running out of the box, and that
which was as modular as it could be and running out of the box.
So that was running out of the box. So it was able to be started, and it ended in something resembling a working operating system. So I could load the modules that are going to work. I was as happy as I could be. Because I didn't want to go back to the redoing the kernel compile, because I didn't want to compile the kernel. I learned a lot, but I didn't want to waste 3 or 4 hours of my time every time I want to change something.
Yeah, I agree. We did that plenty of times, so it was time to use our time a little bit more wisely.
And this is the reason why I'm now fully waiting for the K-patch thing to come along, so that I can change kernels on the fly, so that I don't even need to reboot.
You mean Red Hat's project for live patching of kernels? Or?
Yes. So live exchange of kernels. So not only patching, but just exchanging the new version with the older version.
Coincidentally, something that exists on some other architectures for many, many, many years.
Yes, but let's stick to Linux. Just to mess with you, this is Windows Me.
Thank you very much for that.
But
you do realize that is the OS, the only OS in the history that I've ever used that I really detest.
I completely avoided it. To be completely honest, I avoided.
I mean, it was closely followed by Vista, but still, it was on its own on its own third hill.
I have two things that I need to confess on. First is that I avoided when I was always experimenting with the operating systems.
Yeah, you still are.
Yes. When Windows 12 comes, I'm going to install them as soon as the alpha is released.
Sure, on a virtual machine, right?
No. Real people do it on the
real man.
Bare metal, yes. So, but the other thing is that I was completely on when I installed Windows Me. I tried it. I used it for maybe one afternoon, and then I said, "Okay, screw this. Let's go back to the 98 edition. I'm going to wait. I can wait. I'm not that eager to install this operating system anytime yet."
Let me ask you a question. Do you still have those? I don't know if you did it in the past couple of years, if you reinstalled any of these old
Yes.
OSs. Do you still have those ticks that you have, like Windows 95 installation starts, and you just somehow know the key of the stuff like that, serial number?
I don't know the serial number, but I think that if I saw it, I would probably be able to remember at least part of it.
I still remember most of them.
Yes, DG and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay.
No, let's not go till all the way to the end.
Yes, but
Yeah.
there is a T-shirt
I know. I saw it.
with part of the serial number and says I was there.
Actually, on one of the one of the retro computing groups in Facebook today,
Yes.
one of the guys posted a screenshot of many, and then some keys from that era. Sorry.
But okay, pirate keys aside. Okay.
Crazy people.
Yes, but the idea of switching switching distributions in Linux was never appealing to me. I liked trying out new versions of Windows. I like trying it out because Microsoft is occasionally putting out a version of Windows that works, and they more than occasionally screw things up. And
Windows 11 on your computer eloquently proves that point.
yes, and I like the idea of the box of chocolates and you get what you get.
Carrot and a stick.
Yes, and Linux is just, it's always working, and I can always try a new distribution out in a virtual machine, but I'm almost completely unlikely to be installing this on my bare metal machine. So I have a bare metal machine at home that is running Ubuntu, but I didn't run any other distribution other than Ubuntu and Pop OS. Pop OS was interesting for me because I wanted to see what was happening on the System 76 side, and I wanted to see how did they pull off with their own application store.
One of our students, our administrator, one of our assistants,
Yes.
posted, actually made a video of installation of Pop OS for our channel, so it's also on our channel.
So
You can see it.
Pop OS was interesting to me because of the store. It wasn't interesting as an operating system, but
It's an interesting idea.
yes, but I hate distribution hopping. Distribution hopping is something that I don't understand. I don't understand the need to completely install your production machine every other day.
Weren't those people also doing some laptops and stuff, right?
Yes,
System
they
76.
they started doing the laptops and servers, and then created their own version of the system.
But they still sell laptops, right?
Yes.
I like
yes,
their
yes.
laptops, by the way, very much.
Yes,
And our former colleague has one.
yes, I know.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so basically when I started with Red Hat, I kind of stuck with it all the way to this day, which proved to be a very, let's say, luckily made, without any hesitation, without any thought process. It was just a random choice because I liked the installation part the most. Out of all of the other distributions, I stuck with that. And when I finished college, I wake up from my, I don't know, Red Hat-induced snooze or something. And when I got my first job, I actually started Googling stuff related to Red Hat a little bit, and realized that I also kind of left one thing on the side, which I noticed actually a couple of years earlier, which was the fact that Red Hat, while I was playing with the exams, finishing the college and working with their distributions, whatnot, on the side and administrating stuff, they became quite a big company. And they did one thing which made them kind of appealing in my eyes immeasurably, which was they had the commercial stuff, they had the non-commercial stuff, which I think both of us appreciate, but they had a complete education and certification stack. This was my vision without knowing it at that time, so I was completely oblivious. But I realized that that's something that could lead to something when I realized that they have the system administrator, engineering exam, whatnot. And one of the first things that I did after I got my first employment coincidentally, actually second employment in the computer magazine, after I was done with that, is to go and pass those exams. Which I was aware of that at that time as well, that it's going to surely mean something, which led to basically seeing the whole world.
Okay.
Partially even more so than the editor meets journalist meets whatever part of the career prior to that and during that era.
I wasn't interested in this part of the education
Yes.
back way then because I already got too much into journalism. And I was editor, and I was editor in chief, and I didn't want to. I didn't have the time to invest in education because I was playing with Linuxes all the time. I started in 1993, 94, whatever, and I still haven't stopped. So when I see a new distribution, I'm going to install it in a virtual machine right now. I have a couple
You
of
do
laptops.
realize how irrational it is to install Linux on a virtual machine and Windows on a physical machine.
Yes.
Okay.
At one point in time, a couple of years ago, I had a laptop that you could dual boot, and I think I still have the disk. So basically, what I did is I installed a laptop that you could dual boot. It had 2 disks. I installed a VMware workstation on it. I mapped the virtual machine inside the VMware
Like a physical disk?
Like a physical disk.
And
So-
dual boot from that.
Yes, so I could actually dual boot Windows and then run Linux in it, or I could dual boot Linux and then run Windows in it. So the other system was able to be.
This is why I say that he is a chaotic dude.
Yes, but
Personally, I love that.
Windows has a problem with this. If you are every time you are booting the operating system inside the virtual machine, the complete hardware changes. So Windows has tons of errors that they throw out. Linux is completely behaving. Everything is working. You can run it as a virtual machine on the normal hardware.
Seems like like a metaphor for us, actually.
Yes.
In a sense.
So this is one of those things that I was doing because I was bored and I wanted to try how stuff worked. But being with one foot in the open source world enabled me to do a lot more than I would be if I just stuck to the Windows world. Because people in the journalism part, if you know your way around open source, you get a lot more doors open for you.
Oh, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, because people understand that first, you know what you are doing with your life because you are trying new technologies, but also they understand that you are not committed to one technology and going to be just writing about it and be a fanboy of it.
Actually, while you're mentioning this, I remember this because it was one of the defining experiences of my time in that computer magazine. My first CBIT, my colleague that I went there with, who shall not be named now,
Yes.
introduced me to guys from ABIT, which used to be a motherboard manufacturer, very good motherboards, by the way, and AMD, and he called me the Linux guy.
Okay.
In front of him, he introduced me. Vedran is our Linux guy. He is the man for Linux, and that actually brought a lot of like significant change into my life, because then I got some projects that I did for one of the guys at AMD. I got a lot of motherboards from ABIT, etc. It kind of like snowballed into
Yes.
something that was much bigger than what I was kind of like envisioning at the time. Not hoping, envisioning like in my wildest dreams.
But it's the same today. If you show an inkling of interest in something that is not mainstream, you are going to get immensely better connections and better response from everybody who is working in this field. So, for example, I was doing something. I was talking to students today, a couple of students today, about they are trying to do something on FPGA chips, and I want to do some small. I'm trying to do some small project with the students to enable them to create a small sensor. And while I was doing this, I was talking to a guy who is running a LoRa network here in Croatia, and
How
Basically,
dare you talking to somebody else while you have class?
I'm sorry, I just did it. In any way, I was communicating with him. I wasn't talking. I was writing.
Yeah, texting.
Yes, because I wasn't able to talk during the class. But as soon as I said I want to do something, I was offered LoRa connectivity, different modules, and so on. This is not something that you can expect when you're dealing with mainstream. As soon as you just stray a little bit out of the mainstream, you're going to realize that a lot of people are trying to help you. Not because they want to invest because they are expecting necessarily business connections.
Or return.
Yes, they want to invest because they see that you are interested in something that is completely off the charts, not mainstream. So they want to help you to get the word out. They want to help you, whatever you're doing, they want to help you the word out. And this is the thing that I want to close with, because I think that we should be finishing with this part, because there is going to be another part. I have the idea for another episode. I'm going
Me
to
too.
explain. Yes. So the Linux was not something that I used because I needed to. It was something that was the same as if I used, I don't know, a new version of the screwdriver. It was just a tool that I realized has enormous potential, and it is a way of being a Swiss knife for everything that I want to do in my job as a journalist, in my job as a system administrator, in my job as an educator, and so on. So Linux is not a thing that I'm a fan of. It's just a necessity.
Yes, you are.
Yes, but I'm the fan of.
Okay, technologically fan.
I'm a fan of a thing that actually works.
Me too.
I could say that I'm a fan of whatever brand of, I don't know, TVs work. I'm not a fan of a particular brand. I'm a fan of somebody doing a job that is done correctly, that is always working, and it is going to be dependable, so I can depend my career on. And that's it. I'm not into Linux because Linux is better than Apple. It's not. Right
On
now,
desktop, it's not.
on desktop, Linux compared to Apple, basically Apple is always better. But I wouldn't commit to Apple operating systems because they are just a thing that runs on Apple hardware. That's it.
Okay, that's a philosophy problem as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one as well.
Also, I don't like committing to Windows because we have seen that, for example, Windows 2022 don't work as well as 2019. And
or 12.
Or any other version. But this is a problem. It hasn't happened in Linux world. It hasn't happened that newer version of Linux was much worse compared to the previous version. There were hiccups. They had problems. But they went through them quite quickly. In Windows, it happens that Microsoft needs to, when it's committed to a new version of Windows Server, they're committed. Vista, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, and so on. So Windows 8 is the Windows Me of 2000s.
And Vista as well.
Vista is for the 2000, Windows 8 is for the 2010s. But they're just, in each decade, they are committed to releasing a crappy operating system that they're going to pretend.
The famous cadence.
Yes, they're going to pretend that it never happened. They're going to say that Windows. Right now, I actually saw article that was trying to claim that Windows 8.1 was the release. Windows 8 never existed. Because they want...
Mind-bending reality.
Gaslighting. But that's just what is happening in this part of the administration. For me, Linux is a stable tool that I can use, and I can do a lot of stuff with.
I agree.
So instead of needing a router that is able to connect to the network, you can spin up a virtual machine and then yes.
Thank you very much for playing with my suffering of the past couple of days.
Yes, but you know that you have a solution in the end.
Yeah, I solved it. No problem.
Yes, Linux is usually the solution.
No, it's always a solution for these sorts of problems.
It's not pretty, it's not for the faint of hearted, but it's a solution.
I disagree heavily on that because one of the things that I realized over time is apart from the generalized, view the eye of the beholder, blah blah blah. It's not that. The elegance of Linux actually comes from the fact that it works, and it doesn't matter to me how that looks visually. I don't care. Text mode is perfectly reasonable for me. Actually, the problem that you mentioned, so had to solve a problem for one of our marketing activities, which we managed to do, but internet connection ended up being the problem as well, so we scrapped that. But basically, I was very happy to create a client Hyper-V virtual machine, which worked, connected to two networks, one of them wireless, one of them wired, IP tables between them, IP forwarding and whatnot by connecting via PuTTY. I don't need GUI, I don't need anything. It was minimal installation, which was this small basically on the disk, and in terms of compute and everything that it needs, just works brilliantly. That's my reason why I like it. It solves my problems, never disappoints me in solving them, and it's easy to use. Okay, albeit from the perspective of using it for 25 years, but still, the things that I did today you can learn in a couple of months.
You still can do bridging in Windows 10.
Yes, but it doesn't work properly. I tried that as well. That was my initial.
Yes, I know.
So it worked first time that I did it, but when I switched to another wireless network and I disassembled the bridge and tried to apply it again, then it broke and never worked again afterwards. Windows 10, all of the patches, all of the latest updates.
TCP/IP stack is always the better part of the.
I could have bridged the connections in Linux easily as well.
Yes, I know, but you could have done it in Linux easily, and you could done it in Windows, but it wouldn't work. That's my main problem with Windows. I want things that are advertised
to work as advertised.
To work. Mm-hmm. If there's somebody mentions a networking bridge, mm-hmm. I want this to be a dependable feature. When in Linux, when you say I can create an IP table rule and I can create a bridge between network cards, if I even hear that something is available as a virtual network card, I know that I can do anything with the network. Mm-hmm. In Windows...
That stems from the idea of everything is a file, basically.
Yes, but in Windows, if something is available as a network card, maybe it will work, maybe it won't, depending on how the kernel is going to enumerate the cards.
And the services that you start. Wireless is a perfect example of that on Windows Server. You have to start a separate service for that.
Yes, but okay. But my gripe is with... you can have the cards, but cards are sometimes are going to be enumerated in another way. Mm-hmm. So sometimes
Linux does that as well.
Yes, it does it as well, but you can more or less nail down the configuration and tell it to stop doing that.
Yeah, you can udevconf a little bit, and it's going to work. I agree. With Windows, sometimes that
you just don't have the flexibility.
You don't have the tools to do that properly, unless you want to break the registry.
No, there is probably a tool, mm-hmm. but the tool is some obscure registry key that you need to know, or you need to find out in some dark pocket of the internet that is inhabited by goblins that are doing
the Windows magic.
Windows magic, yes.
Yeah, well, by just waving with their magic wands.
So let's finish this thing.
Yes.
Let's finish this thing. What do? I just say that it's a wrap?
Yeah.
So it's a wrap on this episode of That's IT Show podcast. We'll see you next time.
Yes.
We have honestly no idea what is going to be the next episode. But until then, I'm Yasmin.
I'm Vedran.
And bye-bye.
Bye-bye.